Evening, everybody.
You can get started.
Okay. 6:02, going to call the meeting to order. We'll start with any public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion, not action. Anybody? Yeah,
Where is the owl standing tonight?
right? Green X next to your left foot. There you go.
I would like to thank many people who helped us get the floats into the water that probably a lot of people don't know about because our flatbed trailer was deemed unsafe to put on the roads. So I would like to thank SKB Construction, Stu Brown, for allowing us to use his trailer. I would like to thank Paul Beluska at the boatyard for his prompt response in able to get our floats into the water from Stu Brown's trailer. I would like to thank Zach Pettit from Nearest Divers, who was willing to tow our floats all the way around the island instead of just from Stone Pier over to the anchorage. I would like to thank Custom Floats for bringing up our floats at a timely manner to meet our needs and have them ready for us. I would like to thank Cyrus McLean for agreeing and being timely to get our floats, the old ones, out of position for the new ones to go in. And I would like to thank Tanner Foley for being able to keep all of the equipment we had that was still functional, able to function, to get all the floats in the water.
It's quite a list. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for saying that. Other comments for items not on the agenda? All right, thank you. Moving along, town reports. Vika?
All right. Hello, everybody. All right, so TA report, there's a few things worth mentioning, a number of which will be future discussions. So committee members, this is something that we've talked about at every meeting for several meetings now. Planning Board and Board of Adjustment Appeals only has 3 members on each board, which is the quorum, which means the only way they can meet is if all 3 members are available. Planning Board, it has, as of today that we know of, there are 3 applications that they, well, 4 or 5. There's now 5 different things that are going to be putting in front of them to have meetings and hearings that they have to schedule time for. And there's probably half a dozen or so shoreline stabilization applications that are at the state level that will eventually probably end up in their lap too. And so if anybody knows of anybody or wants to, Planning Board could use some help. Same story goes for Board of Adjustment Appeals. Board of Adjustment Appeals is going to have to see some things in the future as well. And so it's really helpful if the 6 people between those 2 boards that have gone through a couple of years of trying to work as a small group could get some assistance. So if anybody is willing to help or knows of anybody, please let us know. Budget presentation. So the board hopefully will have their final budget discussion tonight, followed by a budget presentation next Wednesday. This is a joint budget presentation that will take place between the town, the school, and the finance committee. So if anybody has any questions about the budget, what is being proposed, what's being taken out or added, highly encourage you to come to this meeting or encourage other people to come to this meeting, because this is where it would be helpful to have those clarifying answers relative to the budget. So that will be next week at 6 o'clock here at the hall. So next one, coastal waters and hearings. So we did receive 2 applications, Planning Board, relative to shoreline stabilization projects. In the process, due to some minor changes in some ordinances a couple of years ago, the town's code enforcement officer was able to pick up on it and determine that coastal waters needs to see and provide a recommendation to the planning board. Coastal Waters Planning Board is aware of it, the applications that they're going to be, the coastal waters is going to be discussing and making ultimately a recommendation to the planning board. The first meeting will take place tomorrow. They'll have a number of meetings as a result of any shoreline stabilization project that comes in their way, in their lap as well. And so for anybody that's interested to see what those applications are, they are on the town website. And there'll be probably a lot more coming down the way. Any questions about that? That was more or less of just making sure that people are aware of the things that are in front of those boards and why those boards have to hear those things. So, next thing is barging in Bennett's Cove. So the town, the goal is, it would have been nice to do it tonight, but the budget right now is the priority to finalize. But the goal is to have a discussion at the next board meeting relative to many Bennett's Cove barging related things. Questions have been asked, whether the town has submitted an application. GDI is working on an application that will be submitted on behalf of the town to the state for some submerged barge ramp. At the moment, nothing has been submitted. There is also a drainage issue that's taken place down there that the town is working on finding the best way to fix it, but also fix it in a way that's not going to impact any current or future barging. And then as well as other general questions that have been raised in the last couple of weeks by either residents or contractors. Contractors are asking whether the planks are going in on May 15th or not. And so that agenda item will kind of cover all of the basics, so then the general public is aware of where the town stands relative to that. And, all right, Island Institute Fellow, the town was selected as one of the communities to have a 2-year intern through Island Institute. It was a pretty competitive process, so it is great that Shabig was selected, and so the individual will start in September. It is a young woman and her husband who will be moving to the island for 2 years. Hopefully, if things work out, her husband will come with her too. And we'll be working on the comprehensive plan as well as one of the other major projects that she'll be working on is the shore access, the town-owned property on the right of way to shore, and having a good plan relative to that, as well as attending planning board meetings and working closely with the action team on a couple of projects as well. So, town attorney, town legal. So Jensen and Barrett has been a long-standing, well, for several years, probably for nearly 10 years, Jensen and Barrett has been the legal representation for the town. Due to a number of their employees who have covered the municipal government retiring or leaving, they're closing that division. Therefore, the town's attorney, Ben McCall, is moved to Drummond and Woodsum. The town has chosen to follow him to that firm, and so as of this week, that is the town's new legal representation. So, Hook Road parking, so work will take place the week before Memorial Day to install 4 parking spaces. That was the original plan. As of today, with conversations with the code enforcement officer, it is most likely anticipated that there will be delay in that project moving forward and being done before Memorial Day. I don't really have a whole lot more to share until we figure out what the process is and then go from there. So, and that is what I have on the TA report. I do have one other thing to mention. Well, probably several other things to mention. One other thing that I am remembering to mention The select board probably received it, well, you guys all have received an email several weeks ago. JPCOG is having their annual assembly. The town is part of JPCOG, pays into JPCOG, but part of that, it is an expectation that the representatives show up at the annual assembly. And so we need, well, Bob, you were one of them, and I believe Mark was the other one, and I don't think we've appointed new people, but May 29,
So still,
JPCOG would like to have one or two members of the public there, or I'm sorry, one of two select board members, or a select board member and myself. Bob, you're still one of them. I'm not sure if you're planning to attend.
won't be here, actually.
So if there is,
It's a dinner, like a late afternoon dinner, and then a brief business meeting, basically. It's an annual celebration more than anything else, but it's their annual meeting. I will be driving a truck with a large piece of wood behind it from Wisconsin to Maine.
Just I attended a meeting with you some months
That
ago.
was a different meeting.
That was the same.
Same group. Yeah.
so I guess if you as a board member want to attend, we can't have three of you there. If we can get one of you there, that'd be great. If we can get two of you, then that means I don't have to go. So,
I'll go if you go.
All right,
we can talk about this
figure that out.
outside the meeting.
All right,
Thank you.
that it?
I have Cumberland County Sheriff's contract, but I will mention that under other business because I'm hoping for a motion to authorize me to sign it, so it's official.
Okay, all right. There are also some departmental reports in the TA report online. Thank you, all the departments, for submitting those. And moving on to the first item of regular business, to discuss the heat pump applications for municipal buildings, take any necessary action. So our GPCOG fellow, Ellie, who is here tonight, right there, has been working on a program through which municipal and school organizations are eligible for enhanced grant support or financial support in obtaining heat pump systems. And Ellie, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Okay, if you can stand over there by the green X, on the green X, next to Jeff's foot.
So efficiency Maine always has some baseline incentives available to commercial entities, so that counts for municipalities and schools as well. But this is an extra funding opportunity notice that really significantly increases the amount that the municipality can get per heat pump or per system. And the deadline has been extended from March 30th to June 30th. So we have submitted a preliminary application with Dave's World. I had 3 contractors come out to look at all 3 town buildings, and we decided to go with them because they gave a proposal that was, well, at the town office, which is what we're talking about today, that was about $20,000 cheaper than the next best setup, which only had about half of the heating capacity. So really good offer from them. As far as the town office goes, I know there's been some concern in the past about the viability of heat pumps there, and none of the contractors I had come out raised any qualms about that. I think it was mostly tied to historically poor insulation, and that's still not great. But there have been efforts, I think 12 years ago or something, to improve that insulation a little bit. And they've calculated the heating load and proposed a system that fits that heating load. So that doesn't seem to be a concern. And then most recently, there was worry about the electrical service not being sufficient to support a heat pump setup, but that was upgraded a couple years ago to 400 amp service that is completely sufficient in tandem with the radio tower. So basically, the town office is, as far as we know, it's a good candidate. We are now waiting to hear back from Efficiency Maine with a formal pre-approval offer letter that will tell us, we already know exactly how much we'll get, but that will be, well, I'm 95% sure that will get us to 100% sure on exactly how big that rebate is. And then we have about 2 weeks to either accept that offer if forward with the project or decline it. And then if we choose to move forward, installation has to be completed by November 30th. And I'd written in the packet, the summary, that we have to pay the entire upfront cost, which for the town office is about $50,000. And then we get a $25,000 check in the mail after completion. But I spoke with the contractor today, and there's actually an option to have the incentive delivered directly to the contractor so that we only have to pay the $25,000 fee and they foot the bill through the end of the project and then get refunded by efficiency main. So that is a good option we're able to pursue if we want to. I had the town garage looked at as well once the deadline was extended, and found out that heat pumps really don't make sense there because of the size of the building, the number of times and the length of time that the big doors are open. So there are a lot of gusts of cold air coming in, and heat pumps operate most efficiently when they're maintaining a steady temperature. So they don't like to give out blasts of air the way fossil fuel power equipment does. So right now, heat pumps just can't heat that space efficiently, but we can do a heat pump hot water heater, which would definitely improve efficiency, save money, and it's kind of the easiest intervention you can do for the heating system to transition to electrification. So that bill was, I think, about $2,500. I also asked for a quote to put a single heat pump in the town garage office, but that's not necessarily worth pursuing because of the way the staff prefers that room to be heated. They keep it at a low temperature and then bump it up for an hour a day or something. So again, that change in temperature is not typically how heat pumps operate, but we have that quote to consider if we want to.
Question, hold on a second, before we go with, any questions for Ellie?
I'm sorry, did you look at the school as well?
Yes, so the school is also moving forward with Dave's World, and they have, my understanding is that their budgeting process happens separately, but I can speak to that project if you'd like.
Probably not tonight because we're trying to come budget. I have a question. Have you gotten any word back yet about what it's going to cost to repair the existing heat units in the fire department side of things in terms of them serving as a backup for really?
Yeah, so I had someone come look at the broken system. 3 of the 4 ceiling units are not working right now, and that's because they have broken fan motors. So they need fan motor replacements. They said that'd probably be about $200 per fan motor, and then I don't know what labor and installation cost would be. I haven't gotten that full quote back, but I think that's going to be pretty minor. And while we're at it, you might replace the 4th too. So all of the existing systems will be left intact as backup, emergency backup.
Good. All right. Other questions? All right. Any questions from Carol?
I just want to thank Ellie for all her hard work on this, because it wouldn't have happened without you really doing the work. Because I think it's a great opportunity, much more advantageous than but I really appreciate all the legwork and getting the contractors over here. You're way better at it than I am.
Ellie now has a master's degree in project management.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Ellie. Any questions for anybody? No? Mika? Anything?
So the only comment that I will offer is relative to the funding part of it. And what I would recommend to the board is that it would come out of the facilities reserve account.
Carol?
So do you need a motion for this?
I don't think so. We're not ready to spend the money yet, so we don't need a motion now, or do we?
You can make a motion and cap it at up to $50,000, and then that way it's done. Or when the invoice comes, if you support the project and you want to move forward, that's really kind of the big thing that we want to know. The motion obviously shows that, or I can, bring the invoice to you later.
Carol?
Yeah, I don't think we should identify the financial amount because we haven't got the offer letter. I think that would be a good T to cross, but if we need a motion to support the project and move it forward, I think it's.
If you want to make one, go for it. I mean, it's better to have one than not.
I make a motion that the Board of Selectmen supports the, pursuing the efficiency main heat pump installation program and, pending the offer letter would support, purchase and installation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Eliza. Discussion from the board? Any comments from the public? All right, motion on the floor, all in favor? Unanimous? Thanks, Carol. David, all right, thank you so much, Ellie.
Yeah.
All right, item 25-026, to discuss adding a warrant article to the town meeting warrant that would expend an amount of town money in support of CCLT's proposed work at the Hook. And the work in question is sort of following on to the work that was done, removing some of the remnant pieces of wood from old seawalls and such down at the Hook. This next phase will be adding a more substantial, a more user-friendly and sustainable pathway to get down beyond where the road ends and out to where one steps on to the bar, and I assume, and beyond as well for the folks at the boathouse. Any comments from the board on that before I ask for any public comments? Mika, anything on that? Nope. All right. So the way this would typically work, I think, Mika, correct me if I'm wrong, you would draft a warrant article that would be part of, does such a warrant article need to come to the board for a vote, or?
So if the board approves that, yes, you want to, you support, it's asking for $5,000 to propose to the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
The number is reflected in the current budget numbers, not because I made an assumption one way or another, because I would like tonight's discussion to be the last budget discussion. And so as final numbers as I could have provided to you, all considering what would happen after, if you approve this and you want to move forward and hopefully the budget is fine, I will then draft up the entire warrant and start it to the town attorney. For this particular discussion, it would be no different than any departmental kind of warrant articles that you see. So it would be to authorize the appropriation up to or $5,000. However, that warrant article, but it would basically be asking the voters to appropriate $5,000 to this project, and it would be its own specific warrant article, so the taxpayers would have the opportunity to discuss just that item and vote on it.
Questions from the board on that? Any comments from the public? Don?
I think it's a great vote.
Thank you, Mr. Guy.
Right. I think I'm in the right place.
You're,
I think this is a great idea. I think that anything that we can do to make it safe to be down there. The town's been a partner in this project for 25 years, from the time it was first conceived. And I just think in fact, if I were at your place, I would say 10,000 and have it be 10% of the project.
thank you, Don. Other comments? All right. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to respond to Donna's comment that in addition to the donation to the project, assuming the town meeting approves it, the town has already authorized funding to move the parking up to the top and to create that parking area, and that's a $15,000 to $20,000 cost. So I think the town is making a good faith effort to support the restoration and adaptation of the site.
Mark?
Just a very quick reminder, clarification question. We abandoned the old agreement that was to reasonably maintain the road. That's accurate?
Correct.
It is. It was voted by the voters at last year's town meeting, and then upon the vote, adequate language was drafted up by the attorney, sent to the Registry of Deeds, and it was properly recorded on the deed that that is the case.
So that means presently the town of Shebig likely has no access agreement down to Indian Island with the land trust or Indian Island Corporation, is that accurate?
Correct, correct.
Thank you.
Other comments from the public? All right, so Vika, do we need a motion on this, or is this a sense of the board thing?
I don't see that you need a motion, because you'll be making a motion and signing the warrant,
Right.
which will have the language that you will be bringing to the voters.
So the recommended amount, all the description, all that kind of thing was in the packet. Everybody okay with that? Okay, good. All right, thanks, we'll go forward with that. Thank you to everybody from the Hope who's been working on that project. All right, moving on to final budget workshop. So we're going to workshop mode at this point to finalize. This is our third version of the fourth hearing, I think, of the budget. And I see a few members of the school committee here. We'll recognize the fact that at their meeting last night, the school committee revised their budget slightly and have expanded their use of their expected undesignated fund balance by $20,000, which in the situation that we're in will be that much less of a tax increase. So very, very much appreciated that the school board responded to this situation so quickly and so positively. Thank you, Jeff, and to the whole school board for that. The other Jeff already left. Vika, in the draft that you sent us last Friday, so that change will not have been reflected, right?
Correct. So there's two changes that have taken place since last Friday.
Can I ask a question about that? So the 5/2/25 version of the budget, so you sent it to us on 5/2/25. Then in the packet is a version that's 5/2/25. Is that, it appears to be slightly updated from the one,
It shouldn't be.
I'm trying to remember what. So technically they would be the same as the one.
They
you
should be
emailed us?
completely the same
Uh,
because I have not generated a new one.
Okay, I could be mistaken. I guess something, I think I looked at the. Ignore what I said while I figure out why I had a question on that.
Okay, so Vika, what's the other change you were talking about?
So, initially in the departmental budget, I had $15,000 for the Island Fellow. Through conversations of trying to figure out what the final cost was going to be, Eliza was able to secure rent for the Island Fellow, and from the very beginning, the initial understanding that if rent was secured, then it's even cheaper for us. It's not cheaper for us, it's just that Island Institute isn't paying it, we're paying it, so that $10,000 is going back in the budget.
I didn't know until this moment her husband was coming. Did you know that?
It was in the email that she sent to both of us. So, it's,
But, so basically, we're talking line,
so under, on the final department report on page 1, under 1300, you are looking at contracted services, which is 1,300, 5,000.
on page 2, right?
Page 2, yes.
Okay.
It was 25, and then I changed it to 15, but it needs to be 25.
Okay.
So
So
that would increase the budget. Thank you to the school department. It's not going to increase the budget because they're helping us out with the budget. So the two changes would ultimately result into an additional $10,000 increase in revenue, which means that it's $10,000 less that we would be committing the taxes, net to be raised by the taxes, than in the proposed budget. So what that in turn What that does to the budget, or with the tax commitment, the difference between the current fiscal year and next year with these changes is 3.267%.
An average tax increase of what?
So, the total budget is going up by 5.8%. What needs to be raised by the taxpayers, what the taxpayers' increase is going to be is 3.267. Because we have bumped up and we have so much more revenue than we have in the previous year, it is showing a 3.267% increase relative to the tax commitment that needs to be committed for this year versus last year.
Okay.
So the two changes are not reflected in the tax calculation sheet, right?
Correct.
But after the two changes, we're at 3.267, is that correct?
So what I did is I took those numbers and I put them in just because it happened today. To give you a percentage number, I put them in the spreadsheet. I didn't have time to figure out what the mill rate is gonna be roughly,
So
but
what's the net difference what's the overall net difference?
$10,000 in the positive versus. So we're decreasing net to be raised by $10,000.
So that would be a point,
Not a big difference, but it's,
So it's something less than 3.267.
No. The 3.267 is with the today's.
Okay, that's what okay. All right, so with that being said, any questions or comments from the board? I have one, because question for you. So on line 691 of the budget, it's a revenue item 75.
691, the budget.
Yep.
What page?
Oh, you're looking at an Excel document, aren't you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I looked at the wrong number. Okay, I'll be there in just a second.
Department? You mean department?
It's the revenue item from Axiom, is what I'm looking at.
So the revenue item from Axiom, you're going to see.
I believe it is Department 6, it's,
74,000.
I created a several.
it says 691 Axiom Bond Bank Service, it's on page 42.
Right, there we go.
Yeah.
$74,000 and change?
Yes, and my question is that offsetting an expense in the 2026 budget year?
So, can you, just so the rest of us can follow along here?
Yeah.
You're talking about 65, so on our budget, page 20, 6,500 and 6,510?
Nope, on your budget on page 42. Page 42.
We're looking at the actual.
Debt
department.
service, Axiom, bond bank.
So it's showing as a revenue, that means it's coming back to the town. 74,584. My question is, up in the bond bank expense section, is there an equivalent number? Okay, so those two offset each other. Does that make us flush with Axiom, or are they still in arrears in making us whole again after this whole project?
So this is only for what the expectation is for fiscal year '26. As of today, they have not paid up to what their debt is to us based on the debt that we've paid out.
Okay, and what is that number?
We've received $20,000 so far.
Against what do they owe?
I don't have the final number in front of me. So the current fiscal year, it was 74,000. The previous fiscal year, it was in, I want to say like $36,000 and change. So they have a ways to.
So they're like 16K behind, or?
So at the end of fiscal year '25, we should technically receive this year's debt
Okay.
that we've paid in from them.
Okay.
Because the agreement was that the debt that the town should Island takes on will be covered by Axiom
Right.
once they start collecting.
So at the end of fiscal year '24, did they make enough payments to offset what we
No,
had paid
because
out?
they hadn't been receiving payments yet.
Correct, but we had already paid out money.
Correct.
At the end of fiscal year '25, is the expectation that they will have paid to us everything that we had spent up through that point in time?
That's the goal.
Is that what's in '25 budget?
There was nothing in fiscal year '25 budget for revenue, so anything that we receive is a surplus to us because we did
That's gonna
not
show up in the undesignated fund?
anticipate as
Yeah.
receiving revenue, because
Right.
at the time of the budget process,
We didn't
they
know what
weren't
they
on
were
the move,
implementation.
correct. Now that they are receiving revenue and they have more subscribers than what the original
base requirement.
agreement was in expectation of what they should receive, we should 100% receive it, and if we don't, then I think
Right.
that's a different conversation.
So my point of all that is to say, I think that is one of those spots that is contributing to the ongoing phenomenon of undesignated funds, undesignated fund balances. We, in fiscal year '25,
Too high.
we budgeted no income from them.
But the
We have
undesignated fund doesn't include fiscal year.
I didn't include fiscal year '25 with anticipating undesignated funds.
I wasn't talking about that particular year's undesignated fund balance. I was more speaking of it metaphorically, if you will. So Axiom was not budgeted to pay us anything in fiscal year '25. Axiom did pay us something in fiscal year '25. We were budgeted to pay into the bond bank in fiscal year '25, and we did pay into the bond bank. The net of those transactions is an unbudgeted income by whatever amount Axiom will have paid us by the end of 2025.
Yeah, it's not for this coming,
Yeah.
that would be into the undesignated fund at the end of this fiscal year.
So
Correct,
when we
which
start, yeah,
applies to
when
next
the
year.
budget
Yeah.
fiscal year '27 starts, ideally, there should be far more revenue. I mean,
Right.
than we anticipated, because that revenue from Axiom will be revenue, not offsetting the cost.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to relate that to revenue for the current discussion. I was simply pointing out that we're still in arrears with Axiom. So that was my question. Thank you, Vika, for that. And you won't know until the end of FY '25, final payments from Axiom, what that number is if they're in arrears at that point in time. Is that correct? Okay.
My goal is to plan to collect $75,000 before the end of June 30th, because they're up and running. And based on the agreement, there is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't have that bond bank debt paid.
Right. And it, from an operational standpoint, it's been wonderful, but that's not what we're talking about tonight, so, okay.
May I ask, so if there are more subscribers than expected, will we get that 75,000, or is it anticipated?
No, the agreement was to cover the cost of the bond bank. So we have a debt, Axiom's supposed to pay it. If they have more subscribers, then that's
That's
revenue
good
for
for
them.
them, yeah, that's good for them, yeah. So back to the current discussion, we're currently at a tax increase of 3.267% with the numbers that have been entered into the budget that we're all looking at. So Carol, yes.
So when you tabulated all the changes you made a week ago, that Friday, I think the most significant change was to the capital improvement fund in terms of total, amount of money, right?
Yes.
So we had said, so right now, our estimated tax increase, did you just say what that number was? I mean, I could calculate it, but it's a little bit less than what it was. We were it's a little under 4, right?
3.67, yeah.
So 3.67.
3.267.
So I guess
267.
3.267, 3.3.
3.267. So given that we first had these in the capital budget, now we've taken some big chunks, I mean, it looks like on the order of 163,000. Do we want to, so that's a good portion of what the Finance Committee recommended putting in. So do we want to revisit that in terms of, you know, we are under where we had given as a cap of about 5. So do we want to revisit reallocating money back into the capital? Is kind of where I'm coming from.
I would support that up to a tax increase of 4%, but no more than that. That's just my personal feeling. I know we all had numbers in mind when we met last week. Vika, are you able to say approximately, so if we're at 3.3% tax increase right now, how much could we add back into capital to get us to 4% tax increase? Are you?
I'm not a math whiz, so this would take me sitting in front of the computer and figuring it out.
I could probably figure it out while we're sitting here, but I think that, in addition, we bumped up the undesignated fund contribution from where we started from 175 to 200, right?
Correct, so I guess maybe worth a brief explanation because the rest of the board didn't receive the, or the rest of the public didn't receive the email with all the explanations.
And I was wondering if we couldn't just briefly go through the changes that you made for the public and then discuss, and in the meantime, maybe I can calculate, you know, that number.
Yep.
Yeah, so after last week's meeting, last Wednesday, which feels like it should have been like 3 weeks ago, you, as a board, asked me to go back and more or less cut the entire budget by 4%, avoiding reserve accounts. So I went through, you had each individually send me information. I went through all of that information, and I also went through line by line of the entire budget. Line by line by line, figuring out whether that number, based by each line, whether there's any flexibility there, based on the information from you and what I was able to do with the entire departmental budget, I could only cut by 1.9%. So what that told me was that as much as I wanted to be able to provide you a full 4% cut to the departmental budget, unless you have specific requests for something, I don't feel comfortable bringing forth any other recommendations, which is why I went into making recommendations going into the capital. At the same time, you asked me to come up with undesignated fund estimate. With the situation that we are in right now relative to the audit not being done and the hiccup that we experienced with some of the inconsistencies with the reconciliation at the end of June of 2024. I went through fiscal year 24 budgeted and actuals and determined an estimated the estimated unused funds in the expense department in excess of funds, and then in revenue and what that would be. Using all of that information, talking to Marjorie on the phone to make sure that I understood what I was doing was actually right, because I started questioning myself about all of it. I was able to predict an anticipated number, and with that, I did not feel comfortable using, I anticipate there is going to be excess from fiscal year 25, especially with revenues that we're receiving that weren't budgeted, but I didn't feel comfortable using any of fiscal year 25 funds to take into account for an anticipated undesignated fund number. And so using fiscal year 24 predicted numbers, I felt comfortable recommending $200,000 for the board, knowing that using $200,000, it would still put you on the lower end of having that between 16 and 25% based on the policy that you have. you'd be at the lower end of that, but fiscal year '25 excess would ultimately bring you back up even more. And so with that, there would be the excess of funds and opportunity if the board later in the year, like maybe at the end of the summer, when we anticipated we'd have to have another town meeting, if there were additional funds in the undesignated fund, at that point, you can ask the taxpayers if they want to use some of those funds to put into a reserve account or to allocate it elsewhere, so.
Okay. Carol, are you still working on your calculation?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the tax rate, what was it? It was 10.27?
The tax rate right
Current tax rate.
now, I've had like 4 different documents, so I want to make sure. The 10.72 was last year, so
10.7.
based on the numbers that I presented you on Friday, the anticipated mill rate is 11.1, which before, I believe last week it was 11.7.
Yep.
So we did drop it down with these changes.
I mean, I think it's still, it would be worthwhile even while I'm trying to figure this out. I mean, we did cut down some things in the departmental budget, and I do think it's worth it for the public who's been steadily supporting this process. I'm just going to read through the changes that we've made from the previous budget that we presented a week ago or so, and this. So one was starting from the admin budget, line 1300, 1010, we removed the custodial salary, or we did this, because right now, we don't have a custodian, so that money was in there to pay for a custodian, but the office staff is cleaning the office, and they have agreed to continue to do that for the time being. So, then on line 13, 5,000, that the whole discussion about the Island Institute fell, kind of back to where we started on that. Then we did make an adjustment to the legal department, line 1900. It was 23,000, and we dropped it down to 20. Hopefully that's enough. Now, legal law enforcement, we actually ended up with an adjustment on this. We just got the sheriff's contract, right?
The Cumberland County Sheriff's contract, yes.
Right, so you had dropped the travel down by 1,000, correct?
Yeah.
And then with the new contract, we're comfortable with where the budget's at right now, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. No changes to the fire department?
Correct.
Okay, code enforcement, it's really based on, we didn't make any changes to the wage rate or anything, but it's based on the average hours, so we reduced that based on what our experience has been, that the average hours are less than the 23 that's budgeted, so we bumped that, we reduced that to 21. And I think given how it's gone the past year now, right, it's pretty, that should be okay. Harbor Master, I think the cost there was related to the mooring software and the way you've reconfigured it so that the consumer will pay the cost of the software when they get their mooring permit.
We
So-
switch mooring companies.
Right.
Yeah, and they'll be charging the individual $7 versus the town paying $7 for your moorings. It's the person paying for them, so.
And then in Public Works, the overtime was decreased slightly. And then I had asked Pete about marine supplies, and she decreased that to the current amount, but didn't want to get rid of it totally. I assume, based on Jeff's recommendation. I don't have it right here in front of me, but, so those both went down.
Yep.
Solid waste, I'd say it's an unknown right now on the whole chipping operation. Frankly, so you decreased that by 5K, but we have no idea what that's gonna be. And so we left the other costs the same.
Hauling got decreased a little bit.
It decreased to 85.
Yeah.
Right. But I have to be honest, we don't know. You know, that's a cost that's, I think one way that we had discussed and Vika put in her memo to us is that, you know, we maybe need to bump up the fees again.
I guess one thing worth to mention while we're on this discussion is I did bump up the revenue for solid waste by a good chunk from 35 to 50. The reason being because we're collecting, we're now charging people very consistently across the board for everything that they should be paid for when they bring something to the transfer station. But I will also be bringing forth a recommendation to really strongly consider charging people, whether it's just commercial or whatever it is, when they're dumping brush and any of those large costs that the town takes on. There's no revenue collected, and so I think that's a big opportunity for revenue that needs to be collected.
We know that the contractor who's been doing the chipping finally raised his price. He doubled it after saying he wasn't going to this year. He did. We have no expectation that he would drop it next year. A lot of wood waste coming in, we can expect more. So I think getting revenue from that cost stream would be a really wise thing to consider.
Is the emerald ash, the ash tree problem, is that figured into any of this?
No.
And are there gonna be grants maybe to help us with that?
No idea.
That's gonna be a huge.
What needs to help us? I mean, what would the help be?
Well, from what I understand is that the ash, ash trees are gonna need to be removed or taken down and then.
Right, so you're saying it's gonna increase the amount of wood in the transfer station, and you're wondering if there's grants there?
Yeah.
I've heard of no such grants.
That's something that would be an individual homeowner's decision, and so to try to predict what that volume might be or how that might impact what the volume of the brushes, what the cost,
Yeah, the larger impact on us is likely to be that our option that we've been talking about of hauling brush off the island is probably gone because we're under quarantine now.
Right.
So we won't be able to haul stuff off because we're under quarantine unless we find an exception.
yeah. Chipping, though, I was told, is not under quarantine.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so you could realistically chip all of that and then barge it off the island, but you can't. So yes, it's.
But we can't chip for double the price we used to pay and also add the cost of hauling it off the island without finding revenue some way somehow. Yes.
So, and then just refresh my memory, because this is a question I asked on hazardous waste, we actually bumped it up to 9,000. Does that include household hazardous waste?
Oh, gosh, let me look at,
I think there was conversation about that including the cost of having a hazardous waste day.
The 2025 budget was 6,000. The 2026 budget has gone up 3,000.
so an increase in hazardous waste removal to coincide with an increase in the volume, so we don't become a storage facility. So we are taking in more. We do pay to remove it, we do charge the consumer to dispose it, but.
So that does not include a household hazardous waste collection program.
Correct.
So I think that's another area where we should recover that cost from the consumer potentially. So anyway, that's just a comment. And I do think we're due for a household hazardous waste program, so I'll try to get it in the next budget. Then on to page 16, which is contributions, one proposal, we actually added 5,000 for the agenda item we just approved. But one proposal which was made was to cut the increased contributions in half. And that would save us minus CCLT and on the order of $10,000. That's not reflected in this budget.
Correct.
But it's something we could discuss tonight. Benefits and insurance, no significant changes, it's really, so that's on page, oh yeah, cemetery, sorry, first cemetery on page 19, there was a decrease of 1,000 from the previous estimate that we had. So we did increase the cemetery by 1,000 to 13,500. No changes to debt service since that's basically out of our control. Page 21, benefits and insurance, some slight adjustments, and this is really based on who's taking what plan. The liability insurance, I asked a question about the liability insurance because it was a big jump. I did look at a couple other towns and they also had, some of them have had some pretty big jumps, but I think that's, they do come out and do a loss survey or whatever you call it, an inspection, and we had some areas of improvement, so it's kind of on us to try to help ourselves lower our premium. But it's not out of line with what other communities our size are paying. So then the big changes in terms of, in the school, the only change to the school is the addition of 20,000 from their undesignated fund. But they had already completed their budget and have already sent it on. But we appreciate them making the changes to the undesignated fund allocation. So moving on to page 38, the changes that were made to the capital funds. So starting from the top, fire department reserve was reduced by 50,000 to 50,000, which is comparable to what it was last year. Land acquisition and development was decreased by 3,000, and that's now 7,000 instead of 10, which is less than what, so that's a decrease relative to even last year. Paving was decreased by 30,000 to 25,000, which is so that's about more, reduced it by half, more than half. Public Works, 90,555, decreased by 50,000, and then rescue vehicles decreased by 30,000. So in essence, we reduced that. I don't know if it was exactly where the Finance Committee recommended we bump things up, but we reduced the capital improvements on the order of what the Finance Committee suggested we increase it by. So we basically withdrawn all of those increases. And then on the revenue side, as Pika just said, she went from 35 to 50 on the solid waste fees, which I think is, personally, I think is reasonable. And then on the school side, an addition on the, an adjustment to the undesignated fund.
Paul, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I know you guys are all looking into the details pretty hard here, but just kind of a high level thing, because I have a little bit of trouble understanding the spreadsheet format. So what was the total expense number last Wednesday night, and what is the total expense number now? Number, not percentage change.
The total expense number right now, after the change from the school committee and the change from the Island Institute item, is $4,628,535.
The total?
I'm sorry, that's wrong.
Can I take a stab?
Please do.
So last week, at the end of last week, the total, everything included, was $4,618,535. As of today, it's $4,418,581.
Okay.
And the big difference is really the capital, right?
Yes.
I mean, in terms of.
The expenditure departmental, it was 1.9% that it actually.
Okay, are you still going, Carol? Are you working on your?
No, I just went through the changes. I was just going through the email that Vika sent us, so everybody else can. So I think where I'm at is we're under what we had used as a threshold of 4 to 5%, and I would propose that we restore some of the capital funds back into the budget so that, we try to start to address some of those things. The other thing is, I noticed that some towns only use the undesignated fund. I mean, it's kind of a matter of semantics, but if they take money out of their undesignated fund, they use it to pay off debt service, to put towards capital, and basically they don't use it to supplement the operational budget, sort of as a priority. In other words, so that I think what the thinking there, I think, is that you're not causing your budget to grow by this leftover funds, and that you're basically having some discipline to budget what you need, and then if there's money left over because the situation you're using it to apply to your capital reserve, or you're using it to pay down your debt, which seems like a reasonable strategy. So I think that's kind of a mindset we can think about, is if we're taking out $200,000 in undesignated funds, our total allocation in capital right now is, I can't remember.
772 versus 940.
Right, and that's a significant amount of money even for our budget, even 772 is a lot of money for the size budget we have, so it's not too shabby already. It's just, I'm kind of reflecting back to Chip's comment about how we've kind of had a budget that's growing under inflation, and so sooner or later we got to catch up. And so I'd be more inclined to bump up the budget a little, to try to bump up the capital, to try to get closer to what we're going to need to have, if that makes sense.
Can I make an alternate recommend, something to think about? I personally don't like the idea of using undesignated fund balance because I think it gives the taxpayers, it doesn't give a realistic understanding of the overall budget. And like I said, this is just an idea, but the board can pull the undesignated fund, show the taxpayers what the actual, because if you're looking to add to it, it's a wash regardless whether you add or remove it. If you remove the undesignated fund and then that budget does go up, you're seeing what the real budget is. We are anticipating another town meeting at the end of the summer relative to some changes on ordinances, flood maps, things like that. At that point, we would have a good understanding of what the undesignated fund balance is. That could be then an opportunity to, instead of now trying to figure out what else could be allocated, have an undesignated fund to work with, that then you can, at that point, allocate money into reserve accounts. Just something to think about.
I think to Carol's point, it's a bit of semantics. We still need to know what dollar change we can make if our discussion goal for right now this evening is to get to a 4% number.
Well,
So whether that's going to come from a reduction in utilization of undesignated funds or an increase in capital expenditure, we still need to know how to get to that number. So, Vika, what was the mill rate in the current fiscal year?
10.72.
10.72. And we're now at 11.1.
Correct.
And that 11.1 represents a 3.267% increase, which is the difference between those two numbers, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to pull up.
So
I can't pull it up on
basically,
here.
Nico, what that does in line 15 of the tax calculation, we would just bump that up. With your strategy, we would just raise that by 200,000 because we're taking out the undesignated fund. I think so.
I don't,
Personally, I'd rather see us add it into capital because I think we now have a reasonable estimate of what the undesignated fund balance is, and we're using from that undesignated fund according to state law and according to town policy.
I personally, I see what you're saying. I am also fine. I actually like the strategy where we maybe don't take out the undesignated. I'd have to figure out how much of an increase it is, but I think then we could really come back with a better informed proposal that keeps our undesignated fund maybe in the middle of the range and make some of these allocations that the finance committee has suggested.
At that time, at that next meeting.
That's not a bad idea.
Right, but we still have to do that calculation, and I have not been able to wrap my head around it. I can't figure out
Well,
how to get us to the 4%.
Can we do a bit of both? So we're doing, I would like to see us do a better job of meeting the recommendations of the finance committee. So perhaps we could do a bit of both. We could put some of it into,
that's kind of where I was going with, if you are, if you pull the undesignated fund now, and then in 3 months, you have the excess of funds, then you take you use undesignated fund to ask the taxpayers to take that money instead of using it to offset the taxes, to put it into reserve accounts. To kind of,
it's just a matter of timing.
yes.
And I think the other thing is, I guess, it's not insignificant, the amount. So if we make the commitment to do that, do move the money, but the amount that we're putting into, 772,000 already that we're putting into capital, including 300,000 for the stone pier, which is a pretty big amount, but I think we need it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I have this, I can't open it on the computer by some reason, but I do have this spreadsheet on my phone, so I can plug in numbers to regenerate a number.
Yeah, and I think if you just add it to that line 15, you could figure it out. So right here, if we bump that up and put it in here, then that's how all the calculations go. Okay.
So do you have an anticipated number that you're looking to put into the reserve accounts?
Well, I think what you have in the budget right now is 772,000.
Yes.
And I would say that would be without the finance committee's recommendations generally. There's some of them are in there, just not full blown. But I would leave it at that and see what that turns out to be for a tax increase.
After taking out the undesignated fund transfer? Okay.
So the piece of paper that I sent you, one of the colored one, if you look at it on the bottom right, there's last year's revenue, last year's tax commitment, last year's tax commitment, and this year's tax commitment.
Yep.
On the bottom, what you will see is last year's tax commitment and what this year's tax commitment would be if you added the $168,000 into the reserve accounts that I pulled out.
Yep.
With the current numbers, that would bring the entire budget at 8.2%.
So that includes a 200K undesignated fund. So we know, okay, so I don't think we want an 8% increase.
Is that an 8% tax increase, or is that an 8% expense?
To the tax commitment.
It's a tax increase.
Yes.
Okay, no, we don't want that.
Um,
But if you
So-
cut it in
so-
half, if you cut that change in half,
Yeah, so maybe put in 100. And then do the rest later. I should be able to do this in my head. I used to be able to, there was a time when I was young.
So you said 100,000?
Yep.
Okay, never mind, I can't do any of this. I'll try my best. So where the board wants it to be at 4%.
so if you change the undesignated fund transfer from 200 to 100, does that get us to there?
Well,
Or we could back calculate out before. I mean, I think some of us were happy with a 5.
I spoke too soon, this isn't gonna let me do it. For some reason, I'm not able to access my computer at the office. Oh. All right. All right, I'm making progress. So undesignated fund, if we do it to 100.
Because we're looking financially at some changes in the landscape, I really do support the idea of having more in our capital improvements now, in case we start running into trouble a year from now. Expenses.
I don't disagree, but I guess what I liked about Vika's suggestion is 2 things. One is we see what the budget really does. And then the other thing is, and maybe that's not practical because it's not too much of an increase, but the other part is we'll definitely know how much is in the undesignated fund. And then we might even want to allocate more potentially into, so we already, I mean, I guess we are saving a lot for capital if we're saving, it's like 20% of our budget, right?
It was with the recommendation with everything included, if you take what was initially proposed and what facilities committee recommended, it was a 70% increase from one year to the next, which is a huge jump. These numbers aren't letting me.
Yeah, so
So whatever you did that got it to an 8% tax increase, all we have to do is do half of that.
Well, I'm trying, but I don't feel confident
Yeah, I
plugging
don't
numbers
wanna-
on here right now to give you a number.
what I would suggest is that using that as a guide and keeping the capital,
Where it is,
keeping the capital where it is, decreasing the undesignated fund, influx to an amount that would put us at around a 4.5% increase, to me, would make sense. Does that make sense to you?
it does. Yep, it does. I would lean toward 4. Others would lean toward 5. I understand. We could, so at some point, do we need to come out of workshop in order to vote? We don't vote in workshop,
We
right?
don't vote.
You don't vote, well, I
This
guess.
is our final budget discussion. We need to give you clear direction tonight.
Yes, tomorrow I need to articulate all of this into a warrant article and send it to the town attorney on Friday,
So that being the case, follow Carol's logic.
Oh, okay, I thought we were doing that next week.
No, next week's a discussion with the
So next week is
public.
the budget presentation.
Yeah.
So this is really the last discussion for
We're
all
done
of you to give me final thoughts, because then I need to put that information into. a
So Vika,
warrant.
if we tell you to take the budget at the end of this discussion, which was what we came into tonight with, plus 20 that came from the school, minus 10 added back into the Island Institute challenge, and we ask you to adjust the use of undesignated funds in order to get us to no more than a 4% or a 4.5% increase, if we give you that direction, can we close the conversation at that point?
For me, that's enough of a direction. Do you want 4 or 4.5?
We have to figure that out.
I need, like, where do you want to be at a percent?
We're gonna have to do that,
If
but
it's
if we
4%,
do
then
that, if we do that.
yes, because then all I'm doing is I'm going back and I'm removing undesignated fund number until I get to that 4%, and I'm not touching anything else.
Okay, right,
If
right,
you-
right. So,
Ask other way around, then
okay,
direction change.
so we'll go down the table, I'll say 4. Richard?
4.5.
4.5, Carol?
4.5.
Liza?
4.5.
David?
Likewise.
So it's 4.11, no, I'm kidding.
That's okay, 4.2.
Kind of fuzzy.
No, I'm kidding, it's 4.5.
4.25 works for me.
The sense of the board is 4.5. It was actually smaller than 4.25, because I'm only 20%, so whatever that number is, it's 4.5%. So what we're gonna ask Vika to do as a group, we're saying, Vika, please finalize the budget by taking the results of tonight's discussion and all these changes that everybody worked so hard to get her suggestions, and she gave us her feedback. Take all of that information, plus the change from the school, plus the change with the Island Institute. Combine that with a reduction in the current draft's utilization of undesignated fund balance to get us to a 4.5% tax increase. That's it. Everybody good with that? All right?
Yeah.
We're done. Yeah?
Yeah.
You've got your work to do tomorrow, but we can all go.
Yeah,
through it.
please don't bother me.
Yeah, right. Won't call you about anything.
And I think at the budget presentation, we would make a commitment to the community that we will revisit the
Yes.
undesignated fund and make some additional plan to make some additional
Capital.
transfers into the capital fund.
Yep.
Once we see where that is exactly.
Yes, yes.
Because I think that's what we're saying.
Lastly, I would suggest that before we lose sight of how this has gone this year, that the 6 of us get together with the finance committee and talk about what changes we could make to process to avoid these pitfalls in the future. So 1, the audit needs to be on time. 2, is there a way to get the tax calculations that result in the calculation of undesignated funds, the tax calculations, of assessor's work that leads to what is the impact, what do we have for an expectation from taxes for the year. If we had all that earlier in the budget process, then these conversations would make a lot more sense. Does that mean move town meeting a month out? I don't know what that means, but we seem to have these same situations in the 3 years that I've been here, where we're deep into the budget process before we learn some of these key numbers. And there've been all kinds of different reasons for that. I'm just suggesting that we as a board or the new board visit those issues before we set a schedule for the next budget next year. So, Carol?
Yeah, I think the finance committee made some recommendations along those lines.
Yep, absolutely. So, all
And
right.
I think one thing that would be interesting is to take out the take out the capital. Just look at the budget separate
Operations.
from the capital and separate from the undesignated fund input and kind of get a sense of where we're at. Because I think the big difference this year is the influx, even without this additional that we might do in the summer, even at 772, that's a big increase from this fiscal year. So I think that's an important thing to get across to the public, that the budget's gone up, but it's because we're putting money in the bank for these future projects.
Yep.
That's my opinion.
All right. Are we then ready to move on? Everybody? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Comments from the public? Yes, Mark?
So you've settled for now at $772,000 recommended for capital.
For
Is
now?
that accurate?
Yes.
And you've settled on a $200,000 ask out of the undesignated fund balance at town meeting?
No.
Nope.
It'll be something less than $200,000 to be calculated tomorrow by Vika in order to bring the tax increase to 4.5%.
I should have said up to.
It'll be less than 200.
Up to or less.
Yep.
And at the presentation next week, you may show what the actual budget would be without applying that undesignated fund balance. Is that what you just said?
No, we'll be showing the use of undesignated funds in an amount that will be determined in the next 24 hours. And that number will be less than 200,000, but it'll get us to a 4.5% tax increase.
Or not greater than the 4.5.
Right. Yes.
4.38.
Yeah.
Okay. And I won't be too much longer. Included in this recommendation is not putting in the 4 recommendations that the finance committee made, which was paving, ambulance fund, fire truck, and public works.
I think we have currently
Yes.
pulled out most of those or all of those.
Those are all pulled out in the same manner as they recommended, with the except for one, I think it's $5,000 less than what
Okay.
was recommended.
And why did the recommendation of facilities, building facilities go up by 30,000? What was that recommendation based on? A goal for some
I think that was
improvements
the
existing?
finance committee, actually, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's okay, I don't need that specific tonight.
So the goal then at that, so go ahead. Sorry.
Well, now I've lost my train of thought.
Derailed you.
Um,
But to finish my response to your comments, the suggestion is that the new board would carry this discussion further at the subsequent town meeting, which will happen late summer-ish. We have to have that relative to some of the shoreland issues, zoning issues. And at that time, we'll know the result of the audit, we'll know a hard number for the undesignated fund balance, and at that time, if there's an opportunity to boost capital investment along the lines of the recommendation of the finance committee, that would be the time that would be discussed.
Yeah, and that leads into my last comment. I believe Herb and I, along with Stu Brown, are still going to try to bring a recommendation to address this drainage issue out here for South Road, which may get us to a point in the next 6 to 8 months to possibly resurface this section from Roy Hill to the Sheboygan, along with possibly getting a price for the chip sealing of the remaining, which would technically finish up the first finally section of the road plan. So just beware, in this budget you have right now, you may not have enough in there
To do it.
based on what the price comes in from the contractor to accomplish.
But if you know that before we get to that late summer town meeting, then we could certainly address that issue at that time.
We're certainly going to have that done.
Yep.
So when would that paving typically occur?
Well, they don't like to wait usually any later than October.
Of the following year, because they're gonna want the drainage work there to settle for a year.
Yeah. So it may not be a big issue, but anyway, thank you for your answer.
Yep. I think, Carol, where you were headed was that might wind up in fiscal year 2027. Yeah.
I have been in conversations with the new representative, and we're gonna try to coordinate a meeting for him to come out so he can in person see these roads. He did give me a quote for the other areas, but then this discussion, it just makes sense, so I'll probably be asking you guys to join on that discussion.
All right. Any other comments from the public on the discussion at the workshop tonight? An esteemed member of the public/finance committee. That's you, buddy.
Last man standing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, having watched this progress, I know how hard everybody's worked, and I know that there are a lot of these numbers are very disruptive that you don't have. So I appreciate your, listen to the recommendations that we have, and thank you for that. The only thing I can suggest is for a really good explanation of the undesignated fund, because I understand that about as well as I understand how they pay bills with you know, some of the other discussions this year are, it's really confusing.
It
So if you're taking it out, putting it in, you know, if people are gonna, well, they change, you know, so better you can describe that and why, and Vika's recommendation makes sense to pull it out and discuss it later, once you have clear numbers. That's all, that's.
a good suggestion, Jay. Good suggestion.
But anyway.
But even with where we left it tonight, we increased the capital investment by 220,000 from last year.
From last year, yes.
So last year was 550, this year we're recommending 772. So we're headed in the right direction.
And if you want, you could say the $200,000, whatever the undesignated fund balance is going directly to that, funding that.
Yes.
But we're not doing it well.
Yeah, it's gonna be less, but
I'm
so
sorry, Mr. Chairman, would you
Yes.
allow two quick more?
Sure.
Be very
Just because it's you, Mark.
Yeah. Philosophically, at least, I agree with what the statement Carol made about possibly having a goal moving forward for the select board and the town of Shebig to try and budget without having the possibility of the undesignated fund ask in the back of your mind. In other words, when you're going through your budget, what has it taken to run the budget, especially the departmental side? How are you using it? If you're asking for more, be sure you're getting real show of need, rationale, and value back to the taxpayer. So philosophically, I agree with you maybe considering that as an approach moving forward. Quickly, down at the Stone Wharf, I really appreciate the work that the Coastal Water Committee and the town of Shebig is making to start upgrading the marine infrastructure, specifically the floats and the ramps. And I would suggest, when you're revisiting your fee structure, that you up our tie-up fees. And anybody that doesn't live here as a resident, they should pay a lot more than we do for tie-up fees. I think tie-up fees right now, for me, $125. I think they should be more. They're $180, $200. Thank you.
Vika, if you could raise Mark's tie-up. Thank you, Mark. Good comments. Thank you. All right, other comments? All right. Yes, Vika.
Before you get done with the budget discussion, just in preparation of next Wednesday, which is
Oh, yeah.
like in 24 hours in the mind of the town office function, what are you looking for? So this is supposed to be a joint presentation between the school finance committee and the town, and so would ideally like to connect with all three of those departments to see if finance committee has a presentation, if the school, what would the town like to do? My kind of assumption is the finance committee will have a little PowerPoint or something based on the work they did, the school. So because you as the board will be bringing these warrant articles to the taxpayers, you ultimately is the body that needs to have the best understanding to explain this. What are you looking for a presentation? Is there anything that the town can assist in trying to prepare it? Did you guys take a chance to look at the graphs that we threw in? Would something like that be helpful? So then we're not waiting until next Tuesday to potentially trying to come up with something and maybe have it in place and available for people to look at leading up to that discussion. So if I can get some direction on that, that would be great.
Carol.
I guess one thing I would like to differentiate is from the sort of what I think of as the operational budget, the capital fund, and debt service, and kind of be able to, you have a lot of detail on this total budget, not including the school thing, but I would kind of simplify it to those items because just so it's more understandable to people. I think those would be the three big categories that I'd want to see.
And
just like these bar graphs you put together, just more simplified.
Okay.
And I think a couple of key bullet points that explain what were the major impacts in each of those three areas in this budget discussion. So the implication of rising insurance costs exacerbated by changes in employees and who's taking advantage of insurance would be one bullet point. On the capital side, clearly the need to invest so that we are able to tackle some of the projects in front of us because of sea level rise would be another one. But I would suggest that if the school's gonna have a, let's say we had a PowerPoint presentation, if the school had 2 slides, finance committee had 2 slides, and the town had 2 slides, and then let the slides, don't read them, let them sit up there while people have the opportunity to ask questions. I would also have a bunch of copies, like 20 maybe, of the full budget. And
Full budget as in like the report that you see?
Yep. That's public information. And then from the finance committee, Chip, I don't know if you guys have talked yet about what you might present next week.
Yeah, they discussed it in their,
Yeah, our expectation was not to get into the details of
Right.
the numbers, but to just present what we did over those
Right.
weeks.
Yeah,
So
and what you presented to us was a draft, right, of the presentation. I thought our feedback was, for the purpose of this May 14th presentation, if we can streamline that.
Oh, no, I never heard anything back. from
Okay.
anybody, So,
I thought that was a discussion we had at the meeting, no? Okay.
so
Okay.
you only want a couple slides.
Well,
It depends on what you're looking for, I guess.
yeah, I would like, because the finance committee is the new entity here and has done so much work, I think this is an opportunity for the public to learn more about what the finance committee has done this year and what they're hoping to tackle in the future. I would focus more on that aspect of it as opposed to the nitty-gritty calculations. And have copies of some of those more detailed slides printed out that people can look at if they want to. But my sense is that if we go into the 20 or 25 slides that you guys had, the detailed slides are gonna lose people. That's my guess. So that's my response to Vika's question. Open to correction or criticism. Carol?
I mean, I guess I think the finance committee should do what they think is best. I think it's our responsibility to deal with the budget, and the school committee can do it in whatever form they want. Maybe giving people a certain amount of time so they can, so maybe, 15 minutes per group or something, to me would be the way to go, rather than telling them how to fashion their presentations.
good.
And I think the finance committee should have the latitude to do what they want.
So time-wise, I would suggest town 15 minutes, school 15 for presentation. Town 15 minutes, school 15 minutes, finance committee 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then an hour for people to ask questions or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Jeff, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's plenty. I mean, we can short it out. And the way I've usually done things like this is to, not necessarily people that have questions about every slide. You don't go through every slide. You present the information.
And then
That whole presentation can be turned into a movie which people could watch, not even by slides. It can do it at some future time. So it's more of a, here's a lot of information. It's more than you can digest and we have time to talk about. Get back to us with questions kind of thing. That's what I usually do.
Do I hear you offering to make a movie between now and next Wednesday?
No, it's part of the software. You can, there's a movie, you'll see a movie on we have a base camp of it, so you can do, but we can get through it quick. Let me, we'll trim it up a little bit, but it was more to explain, get people to start thinking more about.
seeing the nature of the work,
Rather
yeah.
than going into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean present value of this? You know, usually I'll do things like that and say, here's a whole bunch of information. Look, get back and, you know.
So if we did 15 and then 10 minutes of questions, 15 and then 10 minutes of questions, 30, and then questions for however long people want to ask, something like that? Does that sound right to folks?
That's fine.
I think questions after each section are probably better than making people wait until the very end, but to your point, I would lean away from questions
No,
throughout the
you
presentation.
get into the weeds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we can, I mean, a lot of those slides only take 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And I like the idea, while paper copies need to be available, it really would be ideal if these are accessible on the town website and then can be shown. While as people are being seated, up on the screen is the page of the town website with a link to all of the information.
I think it helps to build the culture that people will go to the website. You know, here's information, they'll go for, you know, that, so it can be posted. But yeah, we can do it when we do.
But and if we can have the basics of the presentations available for people to look at by Monday afternoon, that gives people a couple of days to look at it in advance, if that's possible. It's kind of like a packet, but I don't expect you to be able to get it done by Friday. I don't expect anybody to.
But that would be, so that would be 3 links, one from the town, one from the school, and one from finance.
Yeah.
And if
Well,
that's,
no, it would be the budget meeting, and it would have those.
So with what has to be done to get the budget to the town attorney, that is gonna take precedence over anything else. I'm gonna recruit our wonderful bookkeeper, who's phenomenal with Excel documents, to come up with graphs and things like that, and then whatever the school has, whatever finance committee has, whatever the town has, the town has under treasurer budget, and every year there is any information that I share with you, for the most part, unless it's like, so like this email, I didn't share that because within the email, there's some personnel stuff that's not appropriate to be on the town website. But everything else, Krista put under that treasurer. So people can go in and they can look at every document I presented you. And that's where we would put that information and then probably link it towards, under news and announcements, that information is available.
Okay. Carol.
Yeah, and so Andrew, I guess Andrew prepared these bar charts, so I think it would be helpful to have him do them again. I wouldn't go into all the details again that he has here, but I think what is, and if you could do them all at sort of a comparable scale, in other words, $100,000, 3 inches or whatever, you know, and I think that way, and have those ready, not necessarily to show them all, but if somebody asks a question. I think visually being able to see stuff and what the differences are is easier than people, especially in the moment when they maybe haven't spent 6 months on the budget, they can see it better by graph. So I think these are great the way you did them. I just, again, would simplify the detail. And, you know, too much detail generates too many questions that, you know, probably aren't really relevant though.
Joe, you need to get started? Okay. All right. Ready to move on? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, a lot of work. Okay, other business. Carol, I think you wanted to talk about a letter from the town relative to brush cleanup.
Yeah. So I have a couple things under other business, so top on the list, and Ellie's here, so she can fill us in, but, so the wildfire project with Rubicon and Maine Forest Services coming into being, I would say.
Yeah.
We've committed to a date, it's the same weekend as town meeting, and they will be working, from what I understand now, Saturday and Sunday. Does that sound right? They'll arrive on Friday, working Saturday, Sunday, either leave Sunday night or we have a place for them to stay, and we still have to work out, you know, a community dinner, but those pieces are coming together. We do need volunteers, and We have some sites picked out by Maine Forest Service. We have talked, one of the biggest ones, most important ones is Lee Bowman's property at Deer Point. And we met with Lee with the Maine Forest Service a couple weeks ago. And then Ellie's been in touch with CCLT since then. So Lee was on board with it. I think he got a little concerned about, in the interim, about, well, we're just gonna cut everything down and leave all brush there, because the brush removal is really gonna be done by volunteers. And Team Bromacon, I'm sure, will help us, but that's not their primary responsibility. They're gonna be cutting. So I talked with Lee the other night and suggested that we could make a commitment as a town that the brush would be removed by some date certain, say the end of June, no matter what. So even if for some reason all our volunteers disappear or, something happens, we as a community, as a town, would make a commitment to make sure the brush that we generate, because there's other brush in there, but this new stuff we generate will get removed, something like by the end of the month. So, and he said that would be great. I understand he's been doing a lot of cleanup himself, and he just doesn't want to be left with a pile of brush that he's got to get rid of by a bunch of well-meaning but not effective volunteers.
So question, and this, I don't know if it's Carol or Ellie, what's the relationship between brush piles and chipping? So from Lee's viewpoint, if we chip it, is that still a brush pile or is that fine to leave where it is?
I think it's a fire hazard question, and I don't know. I think his preference would be, and I hadn't had that conversation with him, I think his preference would be that we remove everything we generate, which is fair. I think what Maine Forest Service was suggesting is that if we chip it right then and there into some trailer or something, that would just save one more step.
So chip it to haul it, not chip it to spread it and leave it. Okay, got it, okay.
I think that's what he was referring to. And to be honest, maybe we can catch up with Kent tomorrow, because we kind of need to nail some of these things down.
Yeah, because chippers there are at least 4 parties on the island who have bulky, beefy chippers. They're gotta be one of the most dangerous pieces of equipment in the world to operate with volunteers in particular. So that scares me.
I understand.
I'd rather haul brush and take 10 loads instead of 5 loads of chips, just to be safer, but we can figure that out.
Well, and I think we should get on a call with Kent and have the exact, I agree, and have that exact conversation. And the other option is we hire a commercial party to do it, as part of this and fund it. I mean, that's another option.
Yep.
I think the bottom line is we want to be able to, and we don't have to write this letter tonight, but between now and the next meeting, I mean, as long as people are agreeable, I think we do, to make a commitment to Lee that we're not going to leave it there.
Correct. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I think that possibly maybe checking in with legal, because private property, town,
Yeah, there's a public
it's a
service
little
aspect to it.
complicated in some ways, and so making sure that however we phrase it in a way where we're not telling a private resident that we're going to expend taxpayer funds that haven't been authorized. But yes, I
I'm
think.
pretty optimistic that we will be able to handle it all on the weekend that it occurs, but I get that Lee wants kind of an assurance that,
Okay.
This,
Ellen?
Would that insurance apply to all of the selected sites or just Deer Point?
All of them.
I guess probably all of them, but to be honest, that's.
unless they're municipally owned, then.
So there's two, the school property is municipally owned. The kids' place, which is just a very small area, is rec center owned. But I do think the intention is to get it all out.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm inclined to not worry about it except for someone who's asking for an assurance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Right,
There's
so by when do we need that letter?
Well, I think Lee would need it before we start, but I don't think he needs it. I would say let's shoot for trying to have something together for the next, for
Meeting.
the 16th, and we can.
21st. The 14th is the public
Okay, the
presentation.
21st, yeah.
So are they coming with a chipper?
No, well, Maine Forest Service does have a chipper, but they can't bring it till later in June. I'm not sure that's optimal because they'd have to barge it over here, barge it off.
And we're covering those costs if they're.
Yeah, and it's not the presence of the chipper that scares me, it's the utilization of volunteers to run the chipper
I
that
get
scares
it.
me.
Yeah, I'll help her. I'll chip it.
And I don't know how important, I mean,
If it's
typically
just a
maybe
hauler.
they chip it because it's easier to haul that
Right.
way, but maybe that's not an important thing for us.
Right,
There might be people that are interested, I mean, I know that the brush dump has been sitting there, it's more ideal for mulching and things like that, but, I mean, I would take a truckload of chips if they were to be delivered, so I think, I mean, I'm not saying bring them to my house, I think there are people who will probably, if we're trying to get rid of them, if we don't want to bring them to the transfer station where they're gonna sit there,
yeah.
they could be directly delivered to locations for distribution.
I'd be
That's
inclined
an
to have
option.
volunteers sort of manage that independently. I mean, if somebody's got a chipper they're willing to bring and use,
I'm saying if there's excess,
She's saying
We
if
can
we
use
chip them, we
the
can deliver them to
public
people
works
instead
to
of.
distribute, just,
yeah, I get it. I think I don't want to take on, it's gotta be enough to do this.
Yeah, we can't coordinate that in that day, I think we can take it all, whether it's brush or chips, to the transfer station, and then we can deliver it from there.
And the second part of this, which Ellie, you had just mentioned, I think the Maine Forest Service plan is to publicize this quite widely. So they're gonna bring their Maine Forest Service helicopter to the island at the, I think the school, is that right? Yeah. And so that will be a big deal. And then Ellie's had an inquiry from a reporter, I'll let you explain.
I have had inquiries from reporters on other matters, but I was talking about some of the wildfire mitigation projects, and it was, I'm gonna forget the name of their news outlet, but basically it was a TV reporter, and they expressed interest in coming to the island to do a story just on the Team Rubicon visit, if that's of interest.
And the Island Institute the same. I just want to be sure people are cool with that.
I think it would be wise of the town to take on positive publicity.
And I agree with that, and I also, in a lot of instances, it's easy to see how a particular news outlet might look at it as an opportunity for a gotcha piece. There's no opportunity for a gotcha piece with this Team Rubicon thing.
Never say never.
Okay, never. Okay, so by the 21st, that'll be on the agenda on the 21st. And do you have anything drafted or any ideas of like a couple paragraphs that you can run by Vika?
I would probably run it by Ben, frankly, first. So I think I'll come up with some, Vicky and I will work together on this. And I think Lee, I mean, to be honest, I don't even know if it had to be in writing, but I think he'd feel more comfortable, you know.
For the town, it might be wise to have it, right?
Yep.
And I think I understand where he's coming from.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, and then you said you had another new business or other business?
Other businesses, we did get our wildfire grant. We had a meeting today about that. So the next thing is we're gonna get a contract, the money, so it's federal money, it's all NOAA money. They seem confident it's gonna show up. And so we'll get a contract. The board will have to approve that or give the authorization to sign it. Then we will draw down the funds. Once we draw down the funds, to me, it's in the bank, it's good to go. But prior to that, to me, it's not a real thing yet. But I did just find out today, so they're trying to expedite these contract approvals. I don't know if it's possible for us to spend time at I thought next week's meeting also had an agenda, was a regular meeting. So I don't know if we could put a contract approval as part of that meeting or not. That would be ideal if we can. If not, we can do it on the 21st. I think sooner rather than later is better from the state side. So you can think about that. I don't need to know this second. But that's...
That's the wildfire grant discussion, or is that a different one?
It's not a grant discussion, it's the contract.
Right.
That we as a board would have to authorize Vika to sign for $86,000. It's a joint project between Sheboygan and Long Island. So,
Do you feel comfortable making that motion now?
No, I don't have the contract yet, and I want to see it just to be sure.
Okay. Okay, Vika and I'll talk about whether we could do that on the 14th or not. Got that on the agenda item list. Do you have anything else, Carol?
No.
Okay, I've got one, we have coming up in the next couple of weeks, the date escapes me, a joint standing committee meeting with Yarmouth, and there's going to be a Zoom meeting. Carol, I don't know if that changes your ability to attend or not, if it's a Zoom meeting. That just came out in the last couple of days, it's going to be a Zoom meeting. And I had begun putting together an agenda, I emailed it out to a few people. The items I'm aware of from our side that we want to talk about are the proposed memo of understanding relative to Shabig taking the lead on design and engineering work at Cousins Pier, as well as the Shabig floats over there. Second item, discussed just as a general concept, CTC's desire for a larger barge. The dimensions and exact details of which are yet to be determined. And third, to have a general discussion with them relative to DOT's comment regarding the cost of upgrading the Blanchard lot, and to share our thoughts and to learn from them their thoughts on how to proceed with that lot, relative to raise it or not raise it, and protect it and get cars out of there when there's going to be a flood, that whole conversation, just to make sure they've had the opportunity to think about that as well. Additionally, Coastal Waters has asked that we add a conversation item relative to the possibility of adding another float to the existing float system over there to increase the amount of dockage for punts. And I assume that would be without adding any additional dolphins, but.
Is that on the left side, the
Left side
or
is
the one with the CTC?
CTC,
So
yeah.
you're putting another dolphin in and
That's-
another,
No more dolphins, just a dock.
just a dolphin?
That's,
Float
just a float, yeah, just a float, hanging off of the existing system.
for the summer.
Oh, just for the summer, okay, I did not know that.
Well, I'm assuming they would take it out if it's not anchored any more than just hanging out there.
I'll follow up with Justin in the morning,
And I just have a question.
please.
So on the second thing with the CTC barge, I guess what I don't understand is why is that of concern, so to speak, of the joint standing committee? So first of all, CTC doesn't attend those meetings?
They do, as a guest.
I have an answer to that. There's a restriction to the size of the barge, it's
Okay.
part of
Yeah.
the,
That was
part
my
of the
question.
agreement with the.
And CTC will be discussing that then, if they're there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So, any other items that anybody wants to see on the JSC agenda? Okay.
I guess we can thank them for the new gate, it's nice.
There's a gate now at the head of the ramp that goes down to the Yarmouth float that keeps kids from running up and down, which is great. And a dramatic improvement over the piece of plywood that they had taped up with bubble gum.
Oh, a couple lines.
Yeah.
I'd like to just cover the presentation that Richard and I did about the surveys. It was well intended. We didn't count the number of people, but we would like to do the same presentation again, perhaps on a weekend, and publicize it more broadly. And it was well received by the community, both surveys about the priorities and the solid waste survey. So I think it was great PR.
Great.
And just want to move ahead with doing another run through.
Awesome. Okay. Any other business?
I have one.
Yes.
I emailed you all today the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office agreement.
Yep.
I did speak to Cumberland County because I had some clarifying questions about some of these things. I was comfortable with asking for a motion until Bob found a couple of clerical errors in it that I missed, but ultimately, I am looking for a motion from the board to authorize me to sign this upon fixing the clerical mistakes, so then we can have this in place in time for the official start for the sheriff. I did speak to Cumberland County relative to asking the sheriff to be able to ticket and assist the town with the parking ticketing. And I will be having a conversation with the sheriff asking him to do so.
That's great.
That's great. So do we have a motion
So we can do that, okay. I'll make a motion that we authorize Vika to sign the sheriff's contract for this year.
Is there a second?
And I should amend my motion to say with the corrections.
Thank you. Yep, okay with your second?
I would agree with that.
All right, motion on the floor, it's been seconded, discussion? Any discussion from the public? Seeing none, motion on the floor, all in favor? Unanimous? I really like 3 deputies, 24 hours a day. Okay, to approve the minutes from April 16, 2025, is there a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes from
April 16.
April 16th, 2025.
Is there a second? Second by Richard, motion by Carol, discussion, all in favor? All right, thank you, Chris, for that. And items to be placed on a future agenda. First item would be to schedule an executive session to follow up relative to Mitch's final report, hopefully within this fiscal year, this board. Secondly, at the 21st meeting, to vote on a letter relative to committing to make sure the piles of brush are properly removed at the end of the Rubicon work, with some sort of time frame attached to it. Possibly on 5/21, but certainly within the next few meetings to talk about the wildfire contract approval, once the contract has been reviewed and brought forth. That's all I put down from tonight.
Bennett's Cove, you should have Bennett's Cove as a discussion topic for next meeting.
And is this emergency repairs, or is this a result of the engineering?
Just a general discussion relative to where the engineering stands, where the culvert work stands, so.
Bennett's update, okay. Okay,
I'm hoping to have the efficiency main offer for the heat pumps by the 21st.
Great.
So if I do, it'd be great if we could revisit that and either decide to move forward or not, then authorize Vika to sign the proposal.
great. All right, other items? Going once, going twice? All right, would entertain a motion to adjourn.